Hello, my name is Mark Gopin, and I want to welcome you to my blog, markgopin.com. I want to share with you this evening some thoughts about some very encouraging news from President Obama in the last couple of weeks of a strong intention with substantive changes in White House personnel that will man an effort to create a significant reduction in nuclear weapons between the United States and Russia. The hope is to create a fairly quick deal that would result in 1,000 nuclear weapons for each country, in addition to serious negotiations to pull back from the anti-ballistic missile system that the United States was about to place in Poland that caused such an aggressive reaction from the Russians. The relationship between Russia and the United States is critical to the future of hundreds of millions of people for many reasons. Very significantly, the Russian relationship to Iran and to the Middle East, it will be a critical factor in bringing all countries to bear on the future of Iran and its relationship to the West, and particularly its relationship to the possession of nuclear weapons, and for them to be able to move into the possession of peaceful nuclear technology without that resulting in a nuclear arms race that will bring the Middle East to the brink of major confrontations, if not outright war. The second hope is that for Russians themselves, a good deal of the deterioration of the last 10 years has been because President Putin has reacted quite aggressively to a much more militarized United States by militarizing Russia itself, by decreasing liberties, by suppressing voices at home, and also by being particularly aggressive with its neighbors. And so, like in many other places in the world, we see that a sophisticated, clever, and nuanced policy by President Obama has the potential to reverse the damage that's been done in the last few years. Now, in and of itself, the relationship of the world's powers to nuclear weapons has been a very, very destructive catalyst to Cold Wars and to arms races. But there's something else here that should be considered, and that is the allocation of massive funds that went into nuclear arms race and military arms race versus the kind of investments that would have and could have and will in the future go into the kind of global relations that will make nuclear weapons obsolete and eventually someday considered an obscenity by the vast majority of people on the planet. Let me be specific about that. Nuclear weapons for the United States alone cost in the last 50 years, half a century, approximately $5.8 trillion, according to the Brookings Institution study on nuclear weapons costs. That's over and above the Cold War itself between the United States and the Soviet Union costing at least $12 trillion in the last 50 years. By contrast, only $1.7 trillion was ever spent on international development, international relations. That's almost a fifth smaller, a fifth of the cost that went into pro-social global relations, if you will, to try and create a global social contract that was committed to the poor and to peaceful relations, and a twelfth of what was spent on military expenditures and the largest military weapons production and sales in the world coming from the United States. That's 1/12. Now, if we were to reverse this direction, and if President Obama were to see this as an opportunity to not only reduce nuclear weapons, but to shift those funds into international development, international diplomacy, and peacemaking, we could see a revolution that would make the arms race a thing of the past. This is essential in order for us not to end up in a kind of pendulum swing We have a catastrophe in the United States of Iraq, and so we swing the pendulum back to say, okay, we won't spend on nuclear weapons now, we'll be more peaceful. Then comes along more global crises, and the pendulum springs back with somebody hawkish running for office and coming in and immediately spends all the money again in the Pentagon and escalating dangerous arms races. This pendulum back and forth, Vietnam, reaction to Vietnam, this can't go on. And it doesn't have to go on if instead of the money just going into a hole, it goes into an aggressive alternative to what creates and perpetuates peaceful relations between people. We know that it includes a serious investment in people's basic human needs in order to eradicate poverty and in order to create a sense of stability and safety and security across the globe, with a heavy investment in the kind of diplomacy and the kind of peace building and conflict prevention that can revolutionize the way that the planet operates as a whole. The United States, with its enormous economy, even though it's in trouble now, has the resources to shift some of this trillions of dollars that was spent in nuclear weapons and spend them instead on diplomacy and conflict prevention and conflict resolution. As a matter of fact, one of the revolutionary moments in the Irish conflict was the Ireland Fund and the spending over a period of 5 years of approximately $650 million that affected 250,000 people on that small island who actually met each other and worked in peace programs. It meant that 1 out of every 6 people in Ireland were part of peace processes. As opposed to that, right now, only 1%, for example, of Arabs and Israeli kids, Palestinian and Israeli kids, have ever been through any kind of peace building. For just $2 billion a year, $1 billion or even $2 billion a year, you could see that revolutionize the relationship between at least 1/6 of the population in Palestine and in Israel. History indicates that that is enough to create a paradigm shift in relationships and new ideas that can then lead to the kind of atmosphere that makes negotiations, complicated compromises of negotiations between the sides, to be much more likely to succeed. That was the missing ingredient all of these years, and this is eminently possible with a sane investment in an amount of money that is cheap by comparison to war. $1 billion or $2 billion in Israel-Palestine versus $650 billion killing a few 100,000 people in Iraq. The choices are obvious. $5.8 trillion for nuclear weapons that could have destroyed the entire world versus just a couple of $1 trillion more over the next 50 years on diplomacy, international development, eradication of poverty, conflict prevention, and peace building between countries. These are the big choices that we really face if we don't want the pendulum to swing back and forth between left and right anymore, but to simply set the earth and set the global society in a new direction. This is the choice that we have to face now, and I believe that with intelligence and rational thinking, we can see the path to the future that will be nonviolent. Thanks a lot, and I look forward to your comments.